whose incarnation began on the time of 1986, and we greet you again in light and love of the One Creator. Therefore, we shall now address and answer the various queries which are found within the patterns of the sense of self, which will enable the entity to understand the aspects of the inner self within the time. Furthermore, the entity known as Red John has to remember firstly to only understand and experience a greater sense of alignment in this reality and fulfill the recognition of the mastery of the sense of self. Furthermore, this will enable the entity within the vibration of the timeline, as it will find a greater and a higher level of alignment in this reality. The entity known as Rajan Disha has to trust its own inner heart when listening to our messages, as the queries which are in order primarily relates with the understanding about the aspects of what color is the root chakra. We must state that the color spectrum of the root chakra is primarily rooted around the color known as the red color upon your planetary sphere. Furthermore, the entity also wants to understand the characteristics of this energy center or chakra. We must state primarily the main characteristics is the base of the mind-body-spirit complex begins from the root chakra. If the base is imbalanced, most of the energy centers will become imbalanced, and it is indeed one of the most important aspects are the energy centers in the mind-body-spirit complexes of the human entities in your planet, which primarily operates on the vibration of survival and other attributes which are primordial and important for entities to learn to balance. The root ray energy center also works on the distortion of understanding about activities related with the spreading of the genes or reproduction and creation. Further, this is the primary energy center which is balanced in the least amount of people upon your planet, since the balancing of this energy center requires extreme dedication and detachment in letting go of the various types of desires which are found upon your planetary sphere. Therefore, we shall now address the other portion of the query relates with what are the characteristics of a good functioning of the chakra. We must state that as the red ray energy chakra being a good functioning chakra implies that it is balanced. The balancing of this chakra requires a simple facet of firstly realizing that in this energy center the primary emotions of fear, survival, and other aspects of attachment are generated, and the letting go of these emotions immediately will enable the energy center to be balanced. Furthermore, there must also be a balance in the sexual activities of an entity, which means that there must not be excessive sexual activity or not too less sexual activities, which primarily are required for an entity to become balanced. Furthermore, the other query relates with the understanding of what is the characteristic of a dysfunction of this chakra. We must state that the characteristic of a dysfunction of this energy center implies firstly the characteristic of realization that the dysfunction of this energy center in someone primarily is a significant portion of the facet of its expression and experience within the timeline, which primarily is shown through the process of becoming fearful, anxious, or thinking about survival aspects only, which primarily puts the bodily complex into survival modes as known by your people. The primary indicator of this energy center imbalance is seeking excessive types of too much vibration of understanding within the mind's body and spirit complex, totality within the sense of self. The entity known as Rajyan Disha must also remember that the vibration of the other portion of the query relates with the understanding about what are the causes of dysfunction of this chakra. We must state that the main cause is attachment with lower vibratory emotions such as fear and anger, or other attributes such as desires, which primarily lead entities to become imbalanced, thereby leading such an entity to have excessive desires to interact with the opposite sex and to find themselves in a sequence of vibratory rhythms of fear and lower emotions. The other query relates with what is the spiritual function of the chakra. We must state that the spiritual function of this chakra is to provide the spiritual soul of the entity, which is resident within the mind's body complex, to find a system of understanding of when the spiritual complex is activated and to find the barometer of the experiences learned by an entity. Primarily, this root energy center is similar compared with animal-like behaviors as known by your people because of its tendency to excessively focus only on the aspects of survival and desires. Further, we must state that the spiritual complex takes this as a barometer of the lessons learned by an entity who has learned the lessons of overcoming the red ray energy center imbalance will have a higher energy center activated, and it is a signal to the spiritual complex about the progress. Furthermore, the psychological function of this aspect in a person is the emotional states and the mind complex, or the subconscious portions of the mind, which operate in a vibratory system or a fashion which provides for a higher sense of the choices made by such an entity is primarily influenced by this energy center at all times. Further, the entity must remember that the other portion relates with physiological functions are also rooted in the energy center, which creates arousal of the lower so-called sexual organs upon the Earth planet. An entity with an imbalance has more sexual arousals as well as desires of lower vibrations of trying to copulate with the members of the opposite sex, which is the primary overcoming or signal of the physiological function. It also keeps entities in anxiety and fear as a reaction to the red ray being imbalanced. Hence we leave you now. Bye.